From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. Now we begin with the news because the Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro Moros had a high-level meeting with Russian Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov this Tuesday in the framework of the meeting in Caracas of the Russia-Venezuela High-Level Intergovernmental Commission. Speaking following the meeting, President Maduro noted that the governments of Venezuela and Russia are advancing in the construction of their 2021 to 2031 work agenda. They highlighted that this initiative will allow Caracas and Moscow to promote new projects for mutual development and deepen the ties of brotherhood between the two nations. President Maduro thanked his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for the support provided in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and also the U.S. sanctions against the country, and also stressed that Russia plays a fundamental role in the construction of a pluripolar world that challenges U.S. imperialism. And the Venezuelan president stressed that the relations between Russia and Venezuela serve as an example in the construction of a world without hegemony, imperialism and war.
That joins that concept of the need to build a world without imperialism, without wars, a cooperation world, a world of respect to the international right. It is very simple. The model as an exemplar relationship between a giant Eurasian country, world power, and a small.
Meanwhile, Russian Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov noted that the strengthening of bilateral relations between Russia and Venezuela demonstrates the capacity to fight against the unilateral sanctions imposed by the United States against sovereign nations.
And we can state that our commercial and economic relations advanced to a new level, and now we have demonstrated our capacity to counteract those sanctions. Venezuela has stabilized social situation and the economy has grown. We have trade growth of 4%, and this is not the limit. We are working to increase the commercial exchange between our countries.
As mentioned, Venezuela and Russia government officials met in Caracas this Tuesday as part of the Russia-Venezuela High-Level Intergovernmental Commission. Venezuelan Economy Minister Tarek El Aissami, on meeting with Russian Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov, proposed to continue working on the 2021 to 2031 agenda drawn up in the framework of the Commission, noting it will allow Caracas and Moscow to boost new projects of mutual development and strengthen the relations between the two countries. The Venezuelan minister also stated that Russia plays a fundamental role in building a multipolar world and challenging the United States and its attacks on other nations.
Let us establish what we have called the 2021-2031 agenda aimed at consolidating the extraordinary efforts achieved so far between our two nations. I am convinced that this session will be very fruitful for the promotion of important projects and programs in each of the areas of cooperation, and that it will allow us to move towards new work strategies and mutual benefit.
The Venezuelan Minister of Economy also stressed the importance of the High-Level Intergovernmental Commission to promote cooperation between Venezuela and Russia.
This high-level intergovernmental commission, after 15 meetings held since its fourth meeting of co-presidents and as a result of the constant monitoring carried out, has been an essential forum for cooperation for both countries that has allowed us to promote and develop 20 important areas of cooperation to date, including in the financial, energy, technical, military, pharmaceutical, and transport fields, which have been progressively consolidated and strengthened.
The Venezuelan minister also highlighted the support provided by the Russian government to the Venezuelan population in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic on sending the first doses of the Sputnik V vaccine.
Among other areas, the support that Venezuela has received from the government of the Russian Federation has been invaluable, particularly in the current pandemic situation, through the shipment of the first doses of the Sputnik V vaccine, which has been an example not only of the way in which President Putin has handled the health emergency, but also an example of the historic leadership that Russia has had in the international arena, showing its scientific, technological, and humanist capacity to face COVID-19.
Meanwhile, Russian Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov highlighted the 76 years of diplomatic relations between Caracas and Moscow.
We celebrate 76 years of our diplomatic relations, and we have profoundly valued the agreed political dialogue, the friendship, the mutual cooperation between our countries. Our relations mean the improvement of our cooperation in the technical, economic sphere and other areas.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Chile, the Congress delayed to this Wednesday the final decision that will postpone the elections to elect those in charge of drafting the new constitution. The proposal sent by the President Sebastián Piñera to postpone the elections of April 10th, 11th to mid-May advanced in Congress with 24 votes in favor and 1 against. However, it will be this March 31st when particular aspects are defined, such as the date on which they will be held and other considerations. In the middle of the challenges against Piñera, different opposition parliamentarians proposed a constitutional accuse the president for his performance in what they consider is a mismanagement of the COVID-19 pandemic and economic and social policies. The Haitian government of President Jovenel Moïse remains committed to a constitutional referendum despite the mass protests against the move. Government advisors argued that the new constitution is needed to balance the different branches and strengthen the state, and call on opposition leaders to prioritize dialogue in a search for a solution to the political crisis. Hundreds of thousands of citizens demonstrated for 2 days in the streets of the country against the new constitution promoted by the government and called for the respect of the 1987 constitution. They also argued that Haiti has much more urgent problems to attend to and reiterated that Moïse's constitutional term in office came to an end in February, which invalidates him to modify the constitution. With thousands of children and families arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border in recent weeks and parking facilities, President Joe Biden has been under pressure to bring more transparency to the process. U.S. Customs and Border Protection allowed 2 journalists from the Associated Press and a crew from CBS to tour the facility in Donna, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. The facility has a capacity for 250, but more than 4,100 people were being housed on the property Tuesday. In the midst of the pandemic, no COVID-19 test was administered unless a child showed symptoms. Also, nurse practitioners also gave psychological tests, asking children if they had suicidal thoughts. All shoelaces were removed to avoid harm to anyone.
The Donna facility is composed of 2 tents. Both tents, the square footage is about 184,000 square foot facility. Of that, 162 is covered, meaning that is where we can actually put individuals, to include the courtyard.
In the Central African Republic on Tuesday was inaugurated the re-elected President Faustin Archange Touadéra after winning the presidency last December with more than 53% of the votes. Touadéra, who was sworn in for a second 5-year term, calling citizens to foster a climate of peace and security after opponents questioned the presidential election for alleged irregularities. Re-elected president pledged to eradicate armed groups, which he says hinder the country's development. The national ruler also advocated to banish the phenomenon of corruption with the promotion of infrastructures and also called to hold soon local elections. At the ceremony, the president was attended by his counterpart from Burundi, Evariste Ndayishimiye, and representatives of other invited states. Aruba's prime minister resigned on Tuesday after prosecutors on the Dutch Caribbean island announced an investigation into one of the parties making up her ruling coalition for suspected embezzlements of funds, the government said in a statement. The reason for the fall is a criminal investigation into the misappropriation of community funds by the government's party poor. However, crowds of the MEP says they cannot continue to govern with a coalition partner under suspicion of financial malpractice. This happened as a result of unusual financial transaction being reported to the Financial Intelligence Unit. Likewise, the island could go to election due to the Prime Minister's resignation. Saudi Arabia announced plans Tuesday to pump 12 trillion rials, 4.2 trillion, in fresh investments by 2030 to boost the private sector, as the open campaign pushes to diversify its oil-reliant economy. The announcement by the de facto ruler, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, comes as the petrostate battles high unemployment and a coronavirus-triggered downturn.
The total investment that will be pumped into the international economy is 12 trillion riyals until 2030. This doesn't include the government spending estimated at 10 trillion riyals over the next 10 years, and private consumption spending expected to reach 5 trillion riyals until 2030. So a total of 27 trillion riyals of $7 trillion will be spent in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia until 2030.
And gunmen killed 3 Afghan women involved in a nationwide polio immunization program on Tuesday, a day after authorities launched a new drive against the crippling disease. According to officials, the 3 women were killed in 2 separate attacks in the eastern city of Jalalabad when they were all on duty going from house to vaccinate children. An official at the Nangarhar provincial governor's office confirmed the incidents. A spokesperson for the Ministry of Health said the vaccination drive had been temporarily suspended in Nangarhar. Polio has been eradicated across the world apart from Afghanistan and Pakistan. The killing of the polio workers comes after similar attacks on March the 2nd, claimed by the militant Islamic State in Iraq and Syria group left 3 female media workers dead in Jalalabad. Palestinians commemoration. On this date, the Palestinians schedule marches in cities occupied by the Israeli troops. In this context, in Gaza, the violent mobilizations repressed by the uniformed of Tel Aviv, while in the West Bank, at least 10 people were arrested in several cities, despite the violence unleashed by Israeli soldiers. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. According to a report released by the World Health Organization this Tuesday, the COVID-19 origin pandemic is extremely unlikely to have been in Wuhan lab. The report came after 17 Chinese and 17 foreign experts undertook research to trace the origin of the novel coronavirus in Wuhan city in China's central Hubei province from January 14th to February the 10th. The team made assessments on the likelihood of possible pathways of COVID-19 introduction. Ruling out a lab origin, the experts concluded that the coronavirus probably emerged in bats before spreading to humans through an intermediate animal. However, the team said there was not enough evidence to identify the species or to pinpoint where the spillover of the virus from animals first occurred. The team made a series of specific recommendations, including to establish a global expert group to support joint traceability research on the suspect origin of the epidemic. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that the Pfizer-BioNTech firm confirmed it will move up delivery of 5 million vaccine doses to June from later in the summer. The earlier shipment period will boost the number of Pfizer doses received by the end of that month to 18 million doses. Minister of Public Services and Procurement Anita Anand said the accelerated schedule means Canada will receive about 44 million vaccine doses in total by the end of June, more than enough to every Canadian to receive at least one shot. By the end of the week, Canada will have received about 9.5 million vaccine doses from 3 manufacturers, with 3.2 million doses arriving this week alone.
ce qui nous met en...
By the end of March, not only do we have more than 6 million doses, but by the end of this week, we will be having more than 9 million doses of vaccine to Canada to be able to speed up the process. So the work we've been doing for weeks and weeks to increase the pace of the arrival of the vaccines continue. And that is what we announced today. By the end of the week, we will continue receiving 1 million doses from Pfizer per week. But in June, it will be 2 million doses for Pfizer, or simply trying to say that by the end of June, we will be having more than 40 million doses of vaccines to deliver to Canada.
South Africa will restrict the sale of alcohol and limit the size of religious and social gatherings over Easter to prevent the holiday from contributing to a new surge of COVID-19, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced on Tuesday.
11 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which we know to be effective against the dominant variants in our country. We've secured a further 20 million doses and are finalizing this agreement with Johnson & Johnson. So you could say it's in the bag. We are also finalizing an agreement for 20 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine, which requires 2 doses. Last year, the country has recorded more than 1.5 million cases of coronavirus, and there have been more than 52,000 recorded deaths from COVID-19. We remember and mourn each of those lives that we have lost. As I reported when I last addressed you, South Africa has emerged from a second wave of infections. For the past 2 weeks, the number of new cases has remained relatively stable.
The unprecedented health crisis sparked by the COVID-19 pandemic in Brazil is taking a huge toll on the country's poorest sectors. Our correspondent Brian Mayer brings us more details in the following report.
As new mutations of COVID-19 sweep across the country, causing public hospital system collapse in 16 of 26 states, Brazil is facing its worst sanitary crisis ever. Studies show that the Afro-Brazilian poor are dying at a higher rate than any other social group in the country.
This isolation has been complicated because we see that not everyone in our community respects social distancing, so it's a little scary to leave the house.
In Rio de Janeiro's Maré Favela, neighborhood associations have joined together to guarantee food security for the poorest residents, but things are getting harder since the federal government cut its monthly COVID relief payments by 75% to 150 reais a month, which is less than $30 US.
150 reais is not enough to feed a family for 1 month. If you are out of work and have a family and have no way to bring in food home, you also can't socially distance because you have to keep going out to streets trying to get food. People who are hungry are unable to stay at home.
As hunger continues to rise in Maré Favela, the demand for food is beginning to outstrip the supply. Brian Mir, TeleSUR, Sao Paulo.
Homeless people in the Brazilian city of Sao Paulo are being offered the coronavirus COVID-19 jab as authorities roll out vaccinations for this priority group in the midst of the health crisis in the country.
My situation is much worse than those who have their own house because we live with a lot of people. And if it was a matter of money, I would be the last to be vaccinated because I have no financial resources. I am feeling very relieved. I recommend everyone get the vaccine and stay safe at home.
The second wave, it came with greater severity, increasing the cases much more. We believe that this new strain has further aggravated the health of people who already have comorbidities. People living on the streets already have diabetes, syphilis, HIVs, and other diseases besides alcohol and drugs, and are even more vulnerable.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel announced that AstraZeneca's coronavirus jabs will only be authorized for general use among the over 60s in response to a report of blood clots among younger recipients of the shots.
The document of the Commission, based on the currently available but still limited evidence and taking into account the pandemic situation, the Vaccine Commission recommends the use of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine for persons aged over 60 years old.
And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.